All right, so tonight's topic is a fascinating topic. It's called music, the language of the soul. But it's a very extensive subject, and it's impossible for us within an hour to cover all that there is to say about music. But it's a fascinating area. For those of you who know a little bit about music, you play a musical instrument, you know what I'm talking about. But even if you don't play an instrument, I'm sure many of you have had the experience of enjoying a piece of good music. What most people, however, are unaware of is, what does music really do? What does it do to the neshama, to the soul? I called it a safa. I called it the language of the soul. Why a language? Because a language is an expression. It's a way one can express himself. In the same way that writing is an expression, a form of expression, speech is a form of expression. With music, however, it is a unique form of expression because it happens with tunes. Tunes produced by different kinds of instruments. And it's interesting how throughout the world you will come across all kinds of music. Whether it's Brazil, where I'm from, where we very much enjoy samba. Or if you prefer Argentina, you have the tango, right? In the United States, I think they have the jazz, the rock and roll. But not all music is created equal. As you will see, it makes a tremendous difference who the musician is, the instrument that he's playing, who composed the song, and who's singing it. All of this makes a world of a difference. Even though it's true that when it comes to tunes, they're pretty much unlimited. You can produce an incredible amount of tunes and sounds from a variety of instruments. What is limited is the human ear. We cannot hear very high frequencies. The human being can hear pretty well, as long as he doesn't need a hearing aid, you know. But there are certain animals that can hear much better. A dog, for example, can hear higher frequencies. And that is why sometimes they're scared from very loud or certain types of sounds. A good way actually of training a dog involves a whistle. A whistle, the frequency of that whistle somehow is easier for the dog. Dolphins, they say, from research, can hear at the highest frequency of all. Bats, a bat, can detect, I would use the word detect better, frequencies that are higher than man can detect or can hear. So it all depends on who we're talking about, but we're talking here about the human being. The human being may be limited on how much his ear can hear and how much his eyes can see, but what music does for him, it does not do to any other creature in the world. Because as much as he may be physically limited, the neshama is not limited. Not only that, music reaches the highest frequency in the spiritual realm. In what I mentioned last week is the fifth dimension. So when we're talking about influencing the human being on a spiritual level, music does that. And even though he's limited from what he can hear, the neshama is not limited. The music goes directly to the neshama, to the soul, and that is why it is the soul that actually enjoys the music and not our physical body. It's not like a piece of steak or some good food that you enjoy, that you taste, and that you like, and that you quickly forget about. After it's digested, it's gone. Music, even though it can be forgotten, the impression it makes on us is very powerful. I would like to use the word effect. Effect means it does something. It's not just an impression. Music actually has or leaves behind a tremendous effect. And this effect enables the human being to rise to great spiritual heights. Sometimes it's so high that it enables him to receive prophecy, to be divinely inspired. So what is happening here is the neshama, the soul, is connecting through music to its source, to its root. And as a result of that connection, like sticking a plug in the wall, it receives a current. It's electrified. And it is able to feel an incredible special sensation that it could not get from anything physical that you try to give the human being. It's something so special. If you look at the history of music, you will find that it's nothing new. Even the old civilizations appreciated music, but they did not only appreciate, they realized that it was divine. And a lot of what they wrote, the little bit that we have of what they wrote, appears to be related to the stars. Appears that somehow the music they related to the planets, to the stars. For example, the Egyptians, they had a way of writing notes, scales, music scale, and somehow they corresponded to the planets. For example, if you're familiar with music, you have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. You've heard of that, right? Mm-hmm. You have the various keys. By the way, these keys or these letters and this way of describing the keys is just a way that was used historically to educate kids especially, or even adults, to remember better. Not that they have any significance, but apparently the older civilizations, and as you will see from the Kabbalah, did see a relationship between these keys, the various scales, the various notes and pitches, to the planets. For example, B, even though we start with C, usually, at least in this country, B was corresponding to Saturn. C corresponded to Jupiter. D to Mars, I believe. E to the Sun. F to Venus. G to Mercury. And A to the Moon. 7. And we'll be talking a lot about this group of sevens that appears a lot in the Kabbalah. What does 7 represent? What's so special about 7? All I can tell you now is that 7 is a spiritual number. Just remember that. This world, the physical world, consists of 6 sides. We have north, west, south, east, up and down. So we have 6. The Magen David has 6 sides. The 7th corresponds to a spiritual world. The Shabbat is a spiritual day. So it's not a coincidence. Just remember that. The music, the notes, even though there are additional notes and scales, however, you can basically divide it into 7. We're going to talk a little bit later about microtones, for those who know a little bit about music. There are half tones. There are complete tones. Depending on the instrument that you're using, some instruments are very good at producing very, very smaller tones that other instruments cannot produce. So this is interesting that even if we go back, way back in history, we find a connection between the music and the spiritual world. However, the connection that is one of the most fascinating connections is what many say, that there is even music produced by the planets and by the stars, and they called it Sphärenmusik in German. Sphere meaning the spheres. The planets and the stars should produce music. And don't think this is just their imagination. There's actually a lot of research being done about this. There's a lot of claims by astronauts that they've heard all kinds of sounds in space. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But this would not contradict. On the contrary, this would support what the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, and the Talmud, and the Zohar. So it's interesting to note that they were aware of this somehow, that there are celestial bodies out there, planets and stars, that are producing music. Now, what is music exactly? Music is, now remember, not just tunes, not just sounds. When we talk about music, we're talking about harmony. Or as the expression in English is, this is music to my ears. It's harmony. It's certain tunes that when you combine them in the right way, it's so special, it's so beautiful. that the neshama is able to enjoy it, whether it's relaxing or whether it's cheerful, regardless, it's something special because of the combination of the tunes that produces what we call harmony. In the Kabbalah, we also find seven scales corresponding to the 7 olamot ha'asiyah, the 7 worlds, in what we call the asiyah, the world of asiyah, which is more the physical world. You have the 7 sefirot in the Kabbalah, the 7 spheres that correspond also to the Zeir Anpin, or to the physical world, to the world down here below. We have an interesting Gemara that most people would go through it, learn it, but not fully understand it. Shegalgal hama menaser barakia. That's what it says. That the sun somehow produces a very audible sound in the atmosphere. I'm translating rakia as atmosphere. Some may say the sky, the heavens. I think the better translation for rakia in this case is in the atmosphere. And I have a reason for saying that. I mean, there's a lot going on in the atmosphere at different altitudes. Between the rays from the sun coming down here to the earth and the ions that are all the way up there. There's a lot going on. We don't see it, we don't hear it necessarily. And the rabbis tell us it's actually a good thing we don't hear all of these sounds that are being produced by the celestial spheres, because take for example the sun. The sun's sound that it produces, nishma mi sof ha'olam v'ad sofo, the rabbis tell us. It could be heard from one end of the world to the other. It could. I didn't hear it. No, by the way, this is an aside. In the past couple of years or so, and you may hear about it in the internet, you may have read about it, there's a whole bunch of newscasts, people who have filmed, videotaped, recorded strange sounds going on that no one, scientists do not know exactly where it's coming from. Even though there may be one or two explanations that can explain it naturally, it's possible, but someone claimed that something is about to happen, that this is foretelling something. I'm not so sure. You know, so if you ever come across it, just remember, could be not. We don't know for certain. But the rabbis tell us it's a good thing we can't hear all of these sounds being produced by all these celestial bodies, because the human being is blocked, they say. Watum. His eyes cannot see everything in the spiritual world, and his ears cannot hear everything either. For if he would be able to see all that there is to see, including angels and demons, he could not survive. Were he to hear all this beautiful, sweet music, he would not be able to handle it. It would be too difficult for him to hear it. To hear the angels singing, it would be too difficult for him. That's what the rabbis tell us in the Kabbalah, that it's something that the human being would not be able in his physical body handle properly. Does that mean any human being? No, there have been certain human beings, perhaps on a certain high spiritual level, that have been able to handle it. But not the average individual. The average individual, that's what the rabbi says, could not handle it, and that is why he doesn't hear it. Unless, of course, he has good antennas, spiritual antenna, and he somehow is able to hear occasionally this music. But, you know what? There have been reports from people who have experienced NDE, near-death experiences, where they did hear beautiful music. Well, I can understand that, because in an NDE experience, when part of the soul, not the entire soul, part of the soul leaves the body, it is able to see and hear all kinds of things it cannot see and hear while it's within the physical body. Remember, the physical body is limited. It has limitations. The neshama is not limited. It can see and hear and know a lot more. So this neshama has certain abilities. Where does it get the abilities? From its source. The soul is able to relate to the music, because when it hears good music especially, it connects. It connects to its makor, to its source. It's therefore saying to itself, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Imagine somebody who's been hypnotized through regressive hypnotism. As they say, Sometimes it could bring you back memories from a previous reincarnation, a previous lifetime. How? That's the neshama we're touching, the neshama we're tapping into. And all of a sudden, those memories are not gone forever. Not from the neshama. The soul remembers, but it's in a physical body, in a new body, and it's just blank about a past life. Usually it's blank. There are some kids who remember their past life. Some people that all of a sudden have a deja vu. Wait a minute, I've been here before. And we've explained that in other lectures. A deja vu could either be through a dream that you may have seen years ago. A deja vu, it could be a dream. I think many times it is a dream. Because many of the prophetic dreams that we see early on in our life are prophetic, meaning that they will happen 10, 20 years down the road. You say, wait a minute, this looks familiar. Yeah, you forgot about it. You've seen it in a dream, in a real dream, years ago. But a deja vu could also be a previous life. And all of a sudden, the memory comes back. Yes, that's possible. We can tap into that memory sometimes. But the neshama doesn't need to. The neshama is accustomed to this music. Where the neshama, where the soul comes from, it is acquainted with this music. It has no difficulty relating to this music. It enjoys this music. Human music, that is. Music that's produced by human beings. Somehow, this is what it likes. It stimulates the neshama. Remember that music does not stimulate the physical body except for one very interesting way, which I'll explain soon. But otherwise, it's not the physical body that is enjoying the music. The enjoyment and what it really does and where it has a potentially positive effect is on the soul. It's important to remember that we're not talking about physical enjoyment here. Remember, we're talking about something spiritual. And what is happening here is that the neshama can potentially be elevated to tremendous heights. When we talk about music that alters moods, which I'm sure all of you have experienced, whether it's a sad music or happy music, it can alter the mood. And what is happening, even though some biologists or some doctors or psychiatrists may explain it in physical terms, what's happening in the body, what's happening in the brain, it's not really so. It's what is happening to the neshama. So this music has the ability to elevate the soul in many, many ways, whether it's to strengthen it emotionally, to give it hope, or as we said earlier, to reach heights where it could be divinely inspired, whether it's Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, or prophecy. But the prophets historically carried musical instruments with them because they needed, at times, they weren't in the best mood, they're only human. They needed to get into the right mood, otherwise they would not receive prophecy. Prophecy can only come to the prophet if he was happy, with a good disposition, calm, not angry or upset. How do you get somebody out of being upset, right? Being sad or depressed? Music does it. In order to see this in real life, you can even see it from poetry. Something that is written beautifully can have an effect. It can make people cry. Poetry. If something is written nice, you write your wife, your husband, a nice card, as long as they're a bit sentimental, of course. There are people who are very, very cold, and they don't focus on the words, and they don't have the patience. But if you're a bit sentimental, and you read some beautiful, touching, moving words, they can make you cry. Why? Why does it work that way? Because the neshama has an effect on what we call the emotions. Emotions. Not on the brain, on the emotions. Some have done research and have revealed that this music that is played is not only good for the neshama, for the soul, it is even good for plants. Plants have grown differently if they had music played next to them, but not rock and roll. Nice music, classical music. Yes, they tried it out. Now, I don't know if it's conclusive. I don't know if this research is conclusive, but I think it's possible. It's quite possible that a plant can definitely grow better, perhaps, if it's exposed to certain kinds of music. The way this happens, of course, in the human being is through something we call a connection, a chibur. Even though the human being is physical, we said part of the human being, the essence of the human being is really his soul. But the soul is caged, if you want to use that word, or enclosed in the physical body. Even though it's enclosed in the physical body, it can connect to the spiritual world. Music, therefore, forms that connection. I call music, therefore, a channel by which the human being in the physical world can connect easily to the spiritual world. All right, since music is so beautiful and so special, since it does so much for the neshama, for the soul, guess what? There's a tremendous emphasis in Judaism in avodat Hashem, in the service of God, whether it's in the prayer, whether it's in the learning, but especially in the Bet HaMikdash, in the temple. The Leviim, remember the Leviim? What was their job? Part of their job was to sing. Sing with their voice and play certain instruments. And if you look at the Tanakh, you look at the Bible, you will notice all kinds of instruments. Now today you have many kinds of instruments. Depending on the region of the world, each one developed their own kind of instrument using all kinds of material, including, by the way, you know how they used to make, they may still make, the strings of certain instruments with the guts from the animal. Today they may use vinyl. So it's interesting how there were all kinds of instruments all over the world producing different kinds of sounds and tunes. But some are very common in the Tanakh. Some of them we don't know exactly, we're not certain what they are. But approximately, if you read Tehillim, especially Tehillim, you'll find a lot of names of the instruments. And you find one of them, for example, kinor. Now, kinor in modern Hebrew means a violin. They did not have violins back then. If you know a little bit about the history of music, one of the earliest instruments was a harp or a lyre, L-Y-R-E. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And they're similar. The harp and the lyre are very similar. One has less strings than the other, let's say. It's built a little bit differently. The sounds it produces is a little bit different because in one of them you have the strings going inside, and one of them it's outside. Beautiful music, by the way. My harp, lyre, beautiful, really, really beautiful music. And you had flutes, chalilim. You had drums, tupim. You had chatzotzra. You had a trumpet. Anybody remember the Hebrew word for the harp or the lyre? Nevel. Okay. So you have more. But what do they all have in common? They're usually either string-based, like the lute, the original lute, L-U-T-E, based on that idea. You have those that are based on percussion, and those that are based on wind, through which they blew. All kinds of instruments that produce different kinds of sounds. When it comes to learning Torah, when it comes to reading the Torah, as we do sometimes, you will notice it's done with a tune. And how do we know which tune to play? Because we use ta'ameh hamikra, as it's called in English, the cantillation marks. Why should it be with a tune? Why should the reading of the Torah, reading of the Bible scroll, or the learning, when one learns Gemara, why should it be done with a tune? Rabbis tell us that the music helps to retain, it helps the memory retain what was learned. Repetition is very important. Learning in a group is important. But learning with a tune, with music. So the reading of the Torah is done with music. It helps to remember it. When talking about music, a lot of people say that they enjoy it, they like it, they can relate to it. They forget one very important idea, however. The music, even though you can relate to it and enjoy it, it's it's not maximized properly. It has tremendous powers beyond that enjoyment, that passing enjoyment. One of those powers is called therapy. Music is very powerful as therapy. They have found even that certain animals given to certain psychotic people, people who have mental weaknesses, let's say, an animal, a dog, a cat, can be therapeutic. It's interesting. They're finding out many things about what can be therapeutic to people. Medication. You know, I think, my personal opinion, I mean, I'm not against medications. I think medication has helped a lot of people in the past 100 years, has saved many lives. But a lot of it is very, very dangerous to the body. Especially if you don't know how much to take. Even though they have proven to help you in one area, they do damage in another area. So sometimes we have no choice. Some medication is important to take. I mean, what can we do? But let's talk about high blood pressure for a second. You know, some of those pills out there, I'm told, can really do a lot of damage. Long-term damage to people who take them on a regular basis. Again, if you need it, I'm not discouraging you from it. When we talk about alternative medicine, which is another topic according to the Kabbalah, we may get into it a little bit more. But therapy, how a person sees the world, his attitude, how he relates to people. You know, they've asked a lot of old people in Japan and elsewhere, wherever they found people who have lived beyond 110, they asked them the famous question, can you tell us what the secret of long life is? You think they all know? They don't know. One guy says, well, I eat rice a whole day. You know, I don't think he said it was just rice, but he meant certain foods. He didn't overeat. One guy did say the truth. I think it's true. And that is, he never took anything to heart. He never took anything personal. He never felt insulted by anybody. He never got angry. He was always calm, accepted everything. Well, that could surely help. And we all do know that part of longevity has to do with genes too. So it's not all man-made. It's whatever he wants, as much as he wants us to live. But people can have a better quality life and can definitely contribute to their longevity if they eat right, if they do exercise. We know those things. But for a person to have tranquility and peace of mind, there's no doubt it can go a long way. How do you get that? One way is through music. People don't listen every day to good music, and I emphasize good music. You know what good music is? What they call in this country soul music. There are pieces out there, and I'm not going to tell you which ones because I don't want to recommend one over another, but if you ask me privately, I'll tell you perhaps. There are some pieces out there that will make you cry. That are very powerful, very emotional, very soothing, by all kinds of composers, all kinds of singers, Jewish and non-Jewish. So it's therapy. Therapy, very, very important. But besides therapy, music, as seen by the rabbis, is very instrumental in uplifting one, in giving him encouragement. People sometimes lose hope, and they go to some place and commit suicide. Music is very powerful. Let me share with you a story of a great rabbi that I'm familiar with. Not that I saw him because he passed away in the 1920s, but my family is connected to this dynasty of rabbis called Mozhitz. The Mozhitz dynasty is very, very big on music. Some of the songs that are sang today in the Jewish communities of the world, especially the Ashkenaz, come from Mozhitz. They don't know it, but it comes from Mozhitz. Sephardic tunes are a little bit different. This great rabbi, Rabbi Israel Mimozhitz, was diabetic. Unfortunately, he had to go through surgery. He traveled from Poland to, I think it was Vienna, to have the surgery to remove a leg because of the diabetes. They had to remove a leg, part of a leg. And that is very painful, especially back then. They didn't really have the best technology of doing this in a way that would be painless. But the doctor did say, Rabbi, it's going to take a little while till I do my job, and I'm going to give you samei hardama, as we would call it in Hebrew. I'm going to give you anesthesia, so you don't feel the pain or you're half asleep. And the rabbi tells him, you don't need to give me anything. I'll be fine. Rabbi, it's going to take about a half an hour at least. I'm going to be cutting away. Cut, with a knife, your leg. Very painful. Extremely painful. Rabbi says, it's okay. All right. It wasn't easy because he had to insist not to use the anesthesia. The doctor thought he was crazy. But somehow the rabbi convinced him. During the operation, which lasted about a half an hour, the rabbi was singing. He composed a song, famous song known as Eskera. It takes a half an hour to sing it all. My father knows, I believe, most of it. Not too many people know this song. It's a long song, beautiful melody. And throughout the operation, he didn't feel anything. If you looked at him, he was singing, composing the song. When it was over, the rabbi said, so when are you starting? Something like that. He didn't feel anything. And the doctor was left dumbfounded. Incredible. But this is just one example of what music can do. If you're very focused on it. And these rabbis from this dynasty were very much into the music. Beautiful pieces of music. When this rabbi passed away, there was another great, great rabbi called the Rabbi of Ostrovsk Rebbe. When he heard the news that Rabbi of Moshe passed away, he says, I envy him. So all the students of this great rabbi says, what do you have to envy him? You've written great compositions, works of a genius on Talmud and other areas that nobody else could write. He says, why do you have to be envious of him? So he said in Yiddish, von mir wird's a kennen nicht kennen ablernen. From me, no one will be able to learn anything. In other words, what are they going to learn? They're going to be like me? There's nothing that they can pick up from me through looking at what I wrote. But from him, you have any idea how many Jewish people he inspired? How many Jews who were distant from Judaism came closer to Judaism as a result of his music? You know how many people were strengthened because of his music? That is something to envy. That is something very, very special. And I know for a fact, for those of you who remember Shlomo Carlebach, you remember that era? His music was very interesting music, very special. It was music from the heart. And that is why it penetrated the heart. And many Jews during that era, the 60s for the most part, were lost, disoriented, came closer to Judaism as a result of his music. Very, very special individual. This music, as much as it's the language of the soul, it does do something to the body. As I began to say earlier, there's something that happens to the body when we hear good music. Anybody know what it is?
Goosebumps.
Besides goosebumps. We begin to dance. Now, if you ask a scientist, where does dancing come from? Why does the human being want to dance? What makes him dance?
Passionate.
All of a sudden, you got him to think. I assure you that most people do not have a good explanation of why a human being wants to dance. Now, of course, we like it, we enjoy it, but what causes him to want to dance? Why dance? You just sit calmly at your desk and listen to the music. Why do you have to dance and move your hands and feet and go in circles and hold hands and sing along? Think about it. It's a good question. What's the purpose of dancing? What are you doing? Now, of course, you're expressing something. If you're a performer, then you're performing. That's something else. We're not talking here about performance now. We're not talking about showing off either. We're talking about the need to dance. And you know what? What's interesting is that even little children, all of a sudden when they hear good music, they get excited, they want to dance. Just proves what? It proves that it's the neshama communicating to the body. It is ultimately an effect on the body. It's a second effect. It's an indirect effect. The neshama is enjoying it. It's the soul that's enjoying this. But even the body is affected if it's good music, nice music, happy music. Because what is it affecting here? It's affecting the area of emotions. If you want to understand this a little bit better, let me give you an example with tears. You know, there's basically three kinds of tears. When we tear, the ma'ot, right? When our eyes begin to tear, what's happening? Why do we tear? Anybody know?
Joy, sometimes out of joy, sometimes out of sorrow.
There's different kinds of tears, right? Or as we call it in Spanish, lágrimas. There's the basic. Basic tears is something that the eye has all the time. It's a cleansing agent. It cleans the eyes. That's called basic tears. You have something called reactive tears. When do you get reactive tears? To smoke, irritation. You rub your eyes. But then there's the emotional tears. And you know what? There's a difference in their salinity, in the chemical composition of each one of these tears. There's a difference. Studies have been done, research has demonstrated that they actually are different. One is saltier than another.
Which one is which?
The emotional tears are very different than the rest of them. It's a different kind of a tear. And the rabbis actually speak about it too. Emotional tears. Emotions produce tears. And I once explained it many years ago that those kinds of tears are all about is emotions that have not been able to be contained, that they are so powerful that they come out of us in the form of tears. In other words, we cannot contain it. It's so powerful that it bursts out and it comes out in a liquid form. Otherwise, why would it come out? Why not get a headache? Why not have some other sensation? Why tears? Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it that we don't know. We don't know everything. But we do know that emotions can be very powerful, good and bad. And here it's the neshama. The neshama that is connecting or communicating with the body in an interesting way. That when it becomes emotional, the neshama becoming emotional, it sheds tears, emotional tears. I have a question for you. Do you think an animal has emotional tears? They have tears. Do they have emotional tears?
The dogs, they don't, no.
Yes? No?
No.
Yes, they do.
No.
They do.
They have nothing.
They do. Dogs.
All of you are saying partial truth.
Yes and no.
No.
Elephants for sure.
Oh, you know something about elephants. That's very true. That's very true. Remember something. Even though an animal does not have a neshama like the human being does, and we're talking about neshama and emotions here, they do have a nefesh behemi. They do have an animal spirit. So there is something spiritual in them. But that spirit is not like the human's neshama. That spirit is more limited. They may have better vision, like the eagles, and they can hear better, because that's what they need. So they received some capabilities that are more developed than the human being, because that's what they need to survive. It's all about survival. So this is a big argument, though. There's a big debate amongst researchers, and they have not come to a real conclusion. Some claim they have seen elephants or dogs or whatever, but mostly elephants, cry. From my little research into animals, I also like animals, some animals. Elephants do mourn, very much mourn, when they see another elephant that has died, even though it's not part of their group. They identify with their species a lot more than other animals. Not all animals, therefore, and fish are created equal. Apparently, some are more sensitive than others. They don't, however, have the same emotional tiers that human beings have, because that capability of expressing emotion in such a powerful way comes only from the neshama, the human neshama. An animal does not have that, therefore it doesn't have that ability in the same way that the human does. But does it have some ability? Maybe. Maybe some ability. So it is possible that certain animals can relate to something that is very, very emotional. We know, for example, the rabbis tell us a dog, kulo lev. Kelev, why is it called kelev in Hebrew? Kulo lev, it's all heart, man's best friend. Why? There's something in a dog that is very attached. Have you ever seen a picture of a dog who's being reunited with his master after a year or two? It could be very emotional, but it depends on the breed of dog, by the way. There are different kinds of breeds. They're all different. But when that dog sees its owner, after many years, as long as that owner treated it well, did not abuse him, it's incredible. You don't see that with other animals. An elephant has a long memory. It will remember who trained him many, many years ago. So animals can remember, especially if you raise them from when they were little. Not only will they be somewhat more tame with the owner, but they will remember. There's many, many stories of lions who were raised, and tigers, but much more a lion. A lion will somehow relate better to a human being who took care of him, a lot more than a tiger. A tiger is in the cat family, even though they all are in a similar family, but not as much as a lion. A tiger is a solitary animal compared to a lion that lives in prides. It's a very different kind of an animal. And you see their interaction with human beings is also different. So with animals, what you have is a lot of instinct. If they feel, it's an attachment that they need to have for their own survival. So therefore, a mother, whether it's a bear, or whether it's a mountain lion, or whether it's a duck, right? They will feel attached to their offspring. It's normal. Hashem made it so. That's the way the creation works. That the mother and the father, of course, they should both take care of their children. That's instinctive. But real emotions, that's only in the neshama. The neshama somehow feels very, very connected to its source, and it's able to relate in a very unique way when something stirs it up, like music. Okay, now we've come to the point of discussing the different types of music. We understand now how special music can be, what it can do for us, where it comes from. Not all music is the same. I have a secret to tell you, and this is much more elaborated in the Kabbalah. As beautiful as music can be, it all depends also where it comes from. What's the source of this music? Is it clean or unclean? Is it coming from a pure source or an impure source? Who's the composer? Who's the singer? Besides the type of music, who's behind that music? Music can take on different forms depending on where it originated and depending on the language that is used. Let me give you an example of what the Gemara says. When it comes to languages, languages are also very interesting. Languages sound differently. Even the same language will sound differently, different accents, different parts of the same country. You have Spanish, for example. If you hear a Spaniard speaking Spanish, or Mexican speaking Spanish, and Argentinian speaking Spanish, they sound very differently, even though it's the same, more or less the same language. So the Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara chooses 4 languages to describe to us how they're so different and what they're good for. It says Aramaic, and I include Arabic in this because they're very similar in some ways, is very good as a language to be used for mourning purposes, to mourn, to cry. It lends itself very, very well. for that purpose. The Latin languages, the Gemara says Lashon Romi, which means Latin, whether it's Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French, Romanian. These are the basic 5, even though there are more Latin languages or dialects. These are the main ones. These languages that are originally Latin-based are good lepius. If you want to appease, you want to form an intimate relationship with someone, a real strong connection, you want to make your spouse feel good or your husband calm down. This language, if used in the right way, lends itself for romance.
Could it be diplomacy too, or?
No, that you're talking about tact. I mean, obviously, if you want to use tact and you want to be diplomatic, that's nice. But here we're talking about the way the language sounds and the way it's used, the verbs, the words that are used, the way they're composed. So the Latin-based languages are really beautiful. They're really, really nice, even though I'm a little biased, right? Because those are my main languages. But they're very expressive, whether it's in poetry or whether it's in song, but much more when you want to relate to someone on a very close level. It sounds very, very good. Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew, biblical Hebrew especially, is very good or lends itself very well for dikduk, for grammar. Excellent, because the words are made up of roots. And just the way it's used, you have male, you have female, right? Zachar and Nekeva. It's a very interesting language. It's a holy tongue that lends itself very well for dikduk. It is precise, it is predictable, phonetic in some ways too, that's also important. And then we have Greek. Greek is one of the best languages for music. This is the Gemara saying this back then. It didn't say the holy tongue. It could have said Lashon HaKodesh. No. This is not about being prejudiced, about playing favoritism. This is about being truthful. They said that Greek for music is the best. Now, it's hard for me to explain you why, because most of you I don't think know Greek. But if you were to hear Greek, it's easy. It's easy to pronounce. It's beautiful. It's not harsh. It's not difficult. It's not heavy. The words are not too long. Some of the German words can be 29 letters long. Try using that in music. Yeah. I didn't mention Farsi for a good reason. Well, you have many languages today in the world. You know that today you have more than 6,000 languages, if we include all the dialects and variations of languages. So I'm not going to give you, more examples, but not all languages as a language are beautiful to be used in music. They can be used in different ways, perhaps to describe technical terms, but here we're talking about music. So Greek seems to be a language that lends itself very good for music. But that's language. What about instruments? And what about melodies or tunes that are produced by the different kinds of instruments? Is there one better than another? Yes, some of them have advantages over others. Now, I play piano. I studied piano. I like piano. And I think piano is special. Now, why is piano special? It has a very rich sound, soft, and you can really articulate very, very well many beautiful tunes. I think it comes out very, very nice. But it is limited. There are certain instruments that are not as limited. That is what I mentioned before, microtones. If you're familiar with Middle Eastern music, like Arabic and Persian and Turkish music, you may have heard the term maqam or maqamat. What is a maqamat? The best way to explain it in English is, for those of you who learn a little bit about music, is a mode. A mode where you can begin with one key, play then another key, whether it's flat or sharp, and then return to the same key. And there's different kinds of modes. If you want to know what mode is, just think about mood. I'll give you some examples. You have maqamat for Persian, Arabic, and Turkish music. You have the following names that you may have heard. You have Hijaz, Hijaz music is a little bit on the sad side. A little bit more on the sad side. You have Saba. The Maqam Saba is more, at least the way I see it, and others as well, it's more serious, longing towards something, nostalgia, Saba. Then you have Ajam. Ajam is very, very happy music. So the tunes that are being played, the keys that are being used are producing this kind of a feeling, this kind of a sensation, this kind of a sound. Then you have Bayat, which is also joyful. And you have Siga, which is also very loving. Different kinds of makamat that produce different kinds of tones that the ear hears and relates to. Relates to it in different ways. So depending on what you're trying to produce, right, what kind of a mood, right, you would play this kind of tunes. Now, which instruments are usually used for this that are very, very good, for those who know Middle Eastern music? The oud and the qanun. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
The qanun is an incredible instrument. The amount of possibilities that you can do by flipping either your finger or a special, exactly, the little piece that they use is incredible what you can do with it. It's a different kind of sound, however. It's not a piano. It's not an organ. It's definitely not a clarinet, right? But it can produce this kind of music, Middle Eastern music, including microtones, which is small variations, which is not possible in the piano. Speaking about language again, you know, some people sing when they talk. It's interesting that there are some tonal languages. Well, unless you study linguistics, you may not come across this. You know what a tonal language is? A tonal language means that you can say the same word. Depending which tone you use, they mean different things. The Chinese languages, most of them as far as I know, are tonal languages. Vietnamese is a tonal language. The Thai language is a tonal language. I'm going to give you just one example. In Chinese, it's in Mandarin, but it's even worse in Cantonese. In Mandarin, the word ma can mean different things depending on the tone. If you said ma, 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 or ma, did you hear different tones here? They all mean different words. How come? How did this come about? How did this evolve? My theory is that language has something to do with music. Remember, language is another form of expression. And some people sing when they talk in Spanish, and they talk some other. Some people sing it. Mm-hmm. It could be that there's some relationship between the two of them. And when it comes to the Middle East, somehow, because of the language, because of the instruments that they use, you come across that these are not very, very happy tunes or happy languages. A lot of the Persian music is sad. Not all of it. Not the one that when you go to the chuppah to get married, I hope not. Well, it actually depends. Maybe they should play sad music because they should take life seriously. But a lot of it is heavy, it's sad. Maybe it makes you even cry. Music is not just about crying. Remember, it is emotional, but emotions can also be happy emotions, excitement, encouragement, strength. Where do we see all of this kind of songs or tunes and emotions being played out in real life? We see it at war. Are they going to play sad music at war? Oy vavoy, all the soldiers are going to run home. You want to give them encouragement. You're going to make it. You're going to win. Right? Actually, you know what? I have an idea. Instead of playing the national anthem before you play a soccer match or a football match, they should really pump them up with good, happy music. Because that national anthem maybe is not so, I don't know which, I'm not giving an example of a national anthem, but maybe that's not going to make them so happy. But you know why they play it? To give them pride. That's, I think, the only reason they play the national anthem. Be proud. It's your country. You got to win for your country, for your people. Okay. Music can make a difference. Depends which music you play. But getting back to piano, and actually this can apply to guitar, violin, to other instruments. What could make the piano sound or music better? Let's say you know all the keys, you know how to play. What can you do easily, what could you learn, that will make it richer, that will make it more beautiful, more melodious? Anybody know?
Increase the
Put
bass.
your heart into it.
Huh?
Increase your bass. Put your foot on the pedal.
The pedal? No, that's not enough.
The emotion of the player.
Passion.
A secret to which this helps with piano, especially in similar instruments, is called chords. C-H-O-R-D. If you ever learn piano or keyboard, chords make a big difference in the music. Whether it's using the left hand, or whether it's using the right, or both. If you play, know what a chord is? What is a chord? A chord, you're combining 3 fingers or more, but usually 3 fingers at once to play. And the sound it produces by placing 3 fingers at the same time is much more complete, much more powerful, more beautiful, richer. Then there's something called arpeggio. It's taking the chord, taking 3 fingers again, but 1, 2, 3 consecutive, not together at the same time. Different kinds of chords, whether it's arpeggio or whether it's at the same time, and it makes a world of a difference. Years ago, we'll talk about when I was a child, when we learned piano, they didn't teach all these things. Because how long you can learn a year or 2, and that's it. So they teach you how to read the notes, but the tricks, you gotta pick it up later on in life. But this is not it. You know what produces the most beautiful music of all? Not necessarily the chords, even though they're nice. You know the biggest secret to the most beautiful music is an orchestra. Because in an orchestra you have the violin, and you have the flute, and you have the clarinet, and you have the guitar and the electric guitar. You have so many beautiful instruments that when they work together in unison, masterpiece. It can be a masterpiece. That is the trick here. Because each one contributes. Every instrument is nice. Each one contributes, and if you know how to assemble them, how to put them all together, you can have beautiful music. Last but not least, it is very important who the composer of the song is, who's the one that's singing it. As we said earlier, if there's no positive energy coming out of that individual, even though that music may be nice to you, it will have a negative effect. In order for it to have a complete, positive, strong effect on the soul, it has to originate from a pure source. It has to be sung by a good person. People don't see his energy, but I assure you, the energy does matter a lot. On a Kabbalistic level, on a spiritual level, we can't see it physically, but on a Kabbalistic level, yes, it makes a difference what the source of energy is. I want to finish with what Confucius used to say. Very important line that is very, very true. Confucius used to say that he values music very, very much for one important reason. It is capable of completing the personal development of the individual. It is capable of completing the personal development of the individual. It is a very powerful tool. We see, therefore, that this music that we play has the ability to unite, to unify the physical and the spiritual world and the entire creation. That is how powerful it is. And that is why I recommend people to listen from time to time to soul music. Soul music is very, very powerful. It really can do a lot to people. It can encourage them. It can elevate them. It can make them cry. And sometimes people don't cry enough. They need to cry. They need to be serious. It can do a lot. It can excite them. And hopefully it can bring peace into their life, because it has a unifying power, a unifying ability to combine the soul and the body and to unite people to dance together. That is why David HaMelech says in Tehillim that hopefully the time will come when all the nations will get together It says, Kol ha'amim tik'u chaf. Let everybody clap their hands. The time is soon coming that everybody will join. Hold hands, clap their hands. Hariu le'Elohim bekol. And raise your voice in praise and song to Hashem, to the Almighty. This will happen very soon when the entire world will be united. The entire world will therefore worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu with song and with praise. Amen.
Amen.